Hello and welcome to the Viking Home Companion and another story from the good old days. This particular story is going to involve two old friends of mine from the West Kingdom, Viscount Sir Brion of Bellatrix and Sir Chandra. Now, both of these gentlemen were noted for being very good two-stick fighters, two swords or Florentine, as it was called when I grew up in the SCA. Sir Chandra pretty much fights that way exclusively. I have rarely ever seen him fight with virtually anything else other than the occasional polearm. I don't think I have ever seen him with a shield on his arm. Brion, on the other hand, certainly is a fairly well-rounded fighter, but he is still not a slouch when it comes to two-stick. Now, this story deals with me having to fight both of them in rapid succession at a Mist's Coronet. Now, I was not fighting in the lists because I fought generally in Sinagwin Coronet. My household, which was Darkclaw, was Sinagwin. My consort, Mistress Anastasia of Grinstead, was Sinagwin. And so I played a lot up in Sinagwa, even though I lived in the barony of Vindhol, which is Principality of the Mists. I didn't go to many Mists events. I was what most people refer to as a misplaced Sinagwin. RRR. So, any rate, it was with permission of the two coronets that I would fight in Sinagwin Coronet, and that I would therefore not double dip by fighting in Mist's Coronet. So I went to Mist's Coronet, though. I had two reasons for being there. One was I was giving a bardic presentation to the current Prince of the Mists, and I took my armor along with me, and I could fight pickups, challenges, and I offered to fight the buy for some of the tournament. And so at one point, they called for a melee of a big circle, everybody gets in, and you're just not allowed to fight the person on either side of you. And I'm fighting with sword and board. Brion is out there with two-stick, and Chandra is out there with two-stick. So they call the Lehon, and I step out and across and fight one gentleman over here who I cannot recall, but when I turn back around, there's Brion, and Brion just looks at me, salutes, and I salute, and we go at it. Now, I have a couple of tactics that I will use when fighting against somebody who fights with two-stick. My barony had Sir Gregory Falconheart, who was trained in two-stick and is pretty good at it, and he fights in the form where you hold the two sticks like this, pretty much just up and down in front of you. It's a form that Duke Paul teaches and is used by quite a few out there. Brion, of course, fights in that form. So I'm used to fighting against that style. And I have a combination and a few other shots that work pretty well against that. And I'm going to show one of them to you. I'm going to give away one of my trade secrets here. When fighting somebody who's using two-stick, whether they've got them straight up and down like this, or whether they've got them slightly advanced to point out, the way the shot works is this. I'm up in my standard Western form, also known as the Bellatrix form, arm up and elbow back, and sword either down my back or at an angle, shield out in front. And so I lead off with a flat snap. Now, I can already hear somebody saying, Torvald, why are you throwing a flat snap at somebody who's got two-stick in this position? Because they've already got it blocked. You don't have to do anything. They don't have to do anything to block that shot. You're right. But you haven't caught the point of why I am doing this. Throwing that shot does two things for me. Number one, throw this shot, they block it. I have now accounted for this weapon. I know where this weapon is. I know what this weapon is doing. It is blocking my attack. I no longer have to worry about that weapon. This weapon I have blocked with my shield. So at this point, to me, I have accounted for both of my opponent's weapons. So that's number one. Number one, I have isolated and accounted for this weapon. Now, what some of you probably didn't notice is my hand position. Where are my opponent's weapons? Here, right? I throw this shot, where is my hand? Here's a weapon, here's a weapon. My hand is now between the two weapons, correct? Thrown that shot there. Now, here's the trick. Take your elbow, crank your elbow fast and hard this way, and what does it do to my sword? What did my sword just do? I'm here, woof. My sword is now straight up and down between their swords. So it's here, crank, and as I'm cranking, I pull it down. My blade is now between theirs, and I snap my wrist forward and pull out. So it's ding, woof. It's a real smooth single motion. Ding, woof. And I get that smack. And it's actually primarily a two-shot combination. 1, 2. But I can follow that up easily with then a thrust as well. This gets a slot shot down the center, followed up by a thrust to the center. And both of those split the opponent weapons. Okay? So it's isolate and account for this weapon with the shield, crank your elbow, pull it down, snap, and follow up with a thrust. There, I just gave you one of my combinations. So I use this on Brion. Bang! It works. Yes! And you would not believe how much of a yes that is, because if that doesn't work on him, I fully expect to get chewed up. But it worked. So I turn, and right there is Sir Chandra, who has just finished off an opponent and is turning to face me. So I go into guard, he goes into guard, I come up, I start to throw, and he basically goes up one side of me, down the other, and leaves me laid out. And the problem was that not only did that combination not work on him, everything was off. As we exchanged shots, nothing I was doing was working right. And I couldn't figure out, as this went, why. I mean, I was blocking a fair number of his things, but nothing I threw was working the way it should. And I was doing a lot of maneuvering and backpedaling away from him. So, I mean, this wasn't a really quick him drilling me in. It was me throwing stuff and then going on real defensive mode as I'm trying to figure out what is going wrong. And then finally he clubs me. So after I get up and I move off and he goes on, and I don't remember if he won the melee or not, but melee's it between rounds at Coronet, it doesn't matter who wins or not, it's all for fun. But at any rate, he comes off, he pops his hat off, I've already got my hat off because I've been out, and I go over to him and I go, and he goes, I'm left-handed. And I'm just, yeah, I do exactly that. Bam! Because that means all of the slots and angles that I'm expecting are reversed. And I didn't catch on. And that's what got me, was that whole, everything's opposite what I'm expecting it to be. So, that's my story of the good old days involving Sir Brion and Sir Chandra. Yeah, sure, you betcha.